All right, so you inherit a house. Now what? So you might have some questions that you need to answer and go through a process. Are you going to sell the home? Or are you going to keep it? And let's talk about if you're going to keep the property, what that looks like. Are you going to live in the property or are you going to rent it out? And let's just say if you rent it out, what are some of the questions and decisions you need to make? How has the property been transferred correctly? Have you went through the estate? Is there a probate, or excuse me, is there a will, a trust? Do you have the proper documents? So now that you've gone through that and you know that you actually can hang on to the property in your name, but do you have who are the other decision makers? Maybe you have other siblings. Is everyone on board? Does everyone want you to have the property, or which sibling's going to keep it? These are things that you got to think about, and definitely, I know your siblings all love each other, but obviously when it comes to mom and dad's house, it can become a stressful situation. So the next question you have to ask yourself is, like, if you're going to live in the house, what are you going to do with your current property? Are you going to keep that property? Or are you going to sell it? Are you going to rent it? And if so, like, do you have the funds to maintain both properties? Because obviously, think about if there's mortgage payments that need to be paid, any repairs, carrying costs for two properties. There's two sets of utilities, gas, water, electric bill, lawn, snow removal. All these things start to pile up. And these are things that you're going to have to think about as you go through that process. So, but let's just say, hey, I'm not gonna live in it, but maybe I want to rent it out. That's another great option. Have you ever been a landlord before? Have you ever went through like finding tenants and placing tenants and like going through the screening process and making sure you have the right tenant that's going to pay you every month and actually respect the home that your family has owned for several years, right? So, and if you are, who's going to manage that property? Are you going to manage it yourself, or are you going to hire a property management company? And if you're going to hire a property management company, have you ever vetted a property management company to have the right one on your team? And if you've never managed properties yourself, are you ready for those Saturday night calls at 10 o'clock when the kid flushed the football down the toilet and now you got to send a handyman out there, and who is that handyman, right? Or it's cold and all of a sudden the furnace isn't kicking on. So these are just real life things that come up that you got to think about as you go through that process. Next, hey, you know what? I'm not going to keep the property, but I'd love to sell it. Hey, that makes sense, and that could be the right decision for you and your family. The question, though, if you're going to sell it, is, again, it comes down to, does the property does it have to go through probate? Do you have a will? Do you have a trust set up? What are those processes, and how are you going to make sure the property is transferred correctly? The next question you got to answer yourself is, like, what's left behind in the property? What are you going to do with the personal things? Yeah, there's sentimental things for mom and dad I'm sure you want to keep. There's probably also a lot of, maybe you get the 1970s couch that no longer you don't want to keep anymore, and like, what are you going to do with that, right? So there might be just a lot of personal things that you don't want. What are you going to do with those things? Another thing to consider or ask yourself is, how will you deal with those repairs? Like, do you have the money to make any updates to actually sell the property to maximize your profits on it? And maybe you don't want it. Maybe you're like, hey, I don't want to make those repairs, and there's other options for you, right? Another question you need to ask yourself is, like, well, maybe you're out of state. Maybe you work long hours. Maybe you live an hour away from the property. Like, how do you get there on a weekly basis to remove the personal items, make sure the mail's been checked, the utilities are still on, the furnace didn't go out the day that it turned cold? These are all challenges and things that our sellers that we've worked with in the past, these are all things that they've expressed as being stressful in their lives. So these are just things for you to consider as you go through that process. Another thing to think about is, maybe you want to list the property. You think you're going to list it on the MLS. So things you got to think about, like, how long is it going to take to sell? And do I need to clean out the property? And, like, am I going to have to go through home inspections? Is there going to be appraisals, city inspections? So there's a lot of things that go into it, and the amount of showings that take place. So again, these are all possible for you, but they're just things to consider as you go through that process. But again, maybe you're just looking for the easy button. And if that's you, you should reach out to Express Property Solutions, because we would be more than happy to refer you to a probate attorney, walk you through how to sell your property and transfer it, how to help you get all the siblings on the same page so you can sell it, make it an easy process. And you can take what you want, leave what you want, and we're happy to make any of those repairs once we buy it. So reach out to us, and we hope to work with you.